I'm Julie Legg, author of The Missing Piece and diagnosed with ADHD at 52.
And I'm Gel Legg, diagnosed at 55.
Welcome to ADH Difference. In this episode, we'll be talking about small talk. The whys and the hows and the wheres and the goodness knows how small talk is quite painful to many of us ADHDers. Small talk, Gel.
Yes. Okay.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the weather's looking a bit rainy.
A bit rainy. I'm bored already. Look, there's two things I need out of conversation. One is interest. I have to be interested in what we're talking about. And two, entertainment. Now, it's either or. If they come as a package, that's even better. So for me, small talk is talk that does not have any interest for me or entertainment value.
And the reason why that is for ADHD is because of our dopamine deficiency. So we're drawn to that will lift our dopamine by way of interest and by way of fun or entertainment or pleasure or reward.
Yes. And the opposite, the antithesis to that is that even if I take dopamine out of the equation and just think about all these neurons firing off and this busy mind that's constantly going, if you come at me with small talk and that's all I'm getting and it's flat and boring small talk, presented in a boring way, then my mind's completely somewhere else and it just wants to bolt for the door. It wants to be gone. It's not good. It's not good at all.
I often refer to small talk as water cooler talk. That's more like in an office environment where you might see people on a regular basis, hourly basis even, and the questions remain quite flat. Again, about the weather or what did you do in the weekend, when you know they're not interested. You know, you could spill 5 minutes about what you did the weekend and how exciting it was. But in some situations, you sense that they're really not interested. The same with the good morning, Gel, how are you?
Fine.
Yeah, and why? So you've just engaged in small talk. Would you ever feel that you'd say, actually, Julie, I woke up with a numb leg and I forgot my breakfast and then I dropped milk on the floor and got a bit frazzled. And would you ever go into any more detail if anyone asked you such a simple question as how are you?
No, not at first. No, because that's an introduction to a conversation. And it's okay to have that introduction, and 10 seconds later, it needs to go somewhere interesting.
Yes, so that's what I was getting at.
They're pleasantries.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine.
So small talk is beyond the first couple of questions. I think we all have to put up with, go with the flow in many situations where you don't necessarily spill all the tea in the first question. As you said, pleasantries. Absolutely.
Example would be, an example of a small talk conversation, and you may not agree as a listener, is how's work? Well, you don't know what I do for a job, really. You don't know what's involved with work. You're not asking me the intricacies of how my business is going and how things are evolving in that area of commerce. You simply want me to say, fine, that's good, yeah. Or, bit down on orders at the moment. It's tough times. Yeah, tough times. Anyway, how's... that small talk, there's no depth to it. It's as shallow as a puddle. It doesn't fire up the neurons, it doesn't capture our interest, and it doesn't entertain us. So examples of where, some quick examples. So you can meet someone that engages in small talk and isn't very intellectual and isn't going to have an intellectual conversation. We're talking strangers here often, someone in the supermarket or someone comes into your home into your space as perhaps a tradesperson of some kind. And they can have such energy and such a gregarious, big outgoing character and such a presence that they become entertaining. And I'm fine with that. I can spend a lot of time around that. All the time, the energy's there and they're entertaining. It doesn't need to go into some intellectual conversation.
Yes.
Then you can meet someone who's flat as a pancake, very interesting. They're really just dour and they have no animation, but boy, do they have an interesting conversation. They know something about something. And so I am always looking to learn something. I have to learn constantly. And so they can be fine. And then you get the combination of someone with lots of energy and interesting things to say. And wow, that's just perfect. Thank you very much. Come on over anytime.
Yeah. I think in the previous episode we talked about weighting, putting a value on things, and I think when we're chatting to someone, we also put a weighting on the value of our relationship to each other. If they're a stranger, it could be a hit and miss. It could just be a fly-by-night, hello, how you going, and a bit of a chuckle, and you don't wish for any more than that. That's kind of ticks the boxes for that time. But people that you have whether it be a family member or a work colleague that you have an ongoing relationship with, I think for me, my expectations are relatively high. I'm not satisfied just bumbling along with pleasantries. I just feel the need that we go deeper into a conversation. I'm interested in psychology and philosophy and bits and pieces. Now, that would scare the living daylights out of many people that are just quite content to talk about netball or rugby, which is of no interest to me. So, I've got to give and take with that. Some things that I'm interested in might not interest others. So I get that. But the perfect match, as you said, is that even in small talk, if you're able to draw out from them in a short space of time something that might be of interest to you or be a similar hobby or thought, and that's a good space.
And it doesn't even have to be that you're interested in psychology and philosophy at this stage. There's been other interests before and after, and will come after. And I have a list of things I'm interested in. But actually, what we're interested in is not actually the interesting thing. We're not demanding to only engage with people who are interested in the things we're interested in. It's much simpler than that. It's, hello, how are you? Fine, boom. What do you think about what happened with that IT issue yesterday or today almost actually, or last week? What did you think about that? Wow, that was a big one. It was. Did you know so and so? And there is where the conversation goes beyond small talk, and it's a shared experience of something we all go through, whether it's a world event, a local event, the weather. The weather's boring unless it's not boring, unless we've just had a whacking great storm come through. How did you manage in the storm? Oh, the damage up the road. That's okay. That's enough to keep us going.
Yes.
But when you ask a question or you don't get any questions back relating to anything and it just sticks on one level, one level, and often asking about how other people are around us that we know, whatever, or how so-and-so, well, go and ask them. It's me having the conversation with, this is why we're talking now. So I don't know how someone else is, and I'm not necessarily interested until I speak to that person and ask them how it is. I think another one, to be honest, when I used to work with people on a daily basis, which is a long time ago, I managed to sort of get out of that environment and work for myself at home, so remotely, which works for me, nearly 20 years ago now, or over 20 years actually. Anyway, gossip about things, and sometimes about people, which is naughty, can be interesting, provided it's entertaining. Just plain old moaning about people is not interesting, but gossip that's entertaining or has an edge to it, I do get something from that in the short term. So, really, let's come back to, I'm probably going a little off track here, but coming back to why small talk is boring and what examples of small talk. Well, we've done examples of small talk. But
I think if we get back to for ADHDers versus neurotypicals, and just like a hungry person will always be on the lookout for food, that becomes a priority for them. With a deficiency in dopamine, we're always on the lookout subconsciously for anything to lift our dopamine. And yes, it will be things of interest or things that reward us in some way. It doesn't mean bungee jumping necessarily. That's another league altogether. But there's small little things that can raise our dopamine, and sparking up an interesting conversation is certainly one of those.
Yeah, no, well done. You brought it back to where I was thinking. It's so, for example, in our marriage, when we get up and first thing in the morning, it's not always at the same time, but when we meet, when we're in that space for tea, coffee, breakfast, we don't engage in really interesting conversations straight away. Our brains are waking up. What I need to do is I need to go and spend an hour poring over online newspapers from as far as the other side of the world here, local news, international news, whatever's going on. My brain, as it wakes up, it needs to consume interesting stories. Whether that's having a dopamine effect or not, I don't know. A psychiatrist will have to tell me.
I would think
so?
It is.
Yeah.
Well, it's fulfilling that void with interesting information. It's almost like it becomes a conversation with yourself, doesn't it? You don't actually need a physical person to interact with. You're soaking that in.
So say it is dopamine. I'm sure it could be that. Okay, but for me, it feels like these neurons are firing. They've woken up and they're ready for interest. Is it interesting? What am I going to learn? What's happened overnight? I really need to know. Not because it's going to turn my world upside down. It's essential. It's because I just need to know. I need to engage with some information that's interesting as my brain wakes up. And then once that's gone through that process, then we start the conversations, and then we might discuss what's going on. You'll find this interesting, and it can be over here. It can be macroeconomics or something really on paper quite dull but interesting because it's relevant to something in the world, something political. And then over here it can be dog ate my car. And I love that. It's like, oh my God, literally the dog ate your car. That's got my interest. And then and that's humorous and entertaining. So one's very dull and boring and would interest very few people, would interest me, and the other one's entertaining. So it flips between the two. Then at a certain point, armed with coffee and tea and breakfast, I'm ready now for the world. And then later on that day is more likely when we have the more interesting conversations. But if I'm waking up, now imagine short breakfast, going into work with a bunch of boring people that just don't have. But if you go to work and you're there to work, so you don't really have time to have those in-depth conversations. So I understand and accept that. But I need to get them from somewhere. And if I can't get them from a person or people, I have to get them from what I read. My brain just can't cope with dullness.
I agree. And it's this boring thing. And sadly. But at times we need to suffer small talk. Goodness, it might be at a funeral and there are some pleasantries with guests that we just need to go through. We might not be in the mood to do that, but it's the right thing to do.
I don't just stop. Yeah, funerals are relatively rare, so I think
yes,
to be fair on us ADHDers, when we have these solemn occasions, we rightfully mask in a situation like that, and we should do. And I don't think we have any issue doing that for these solemn moments. That's fine.
Absolutely.
I know where you're going with this example. Let's think of more regular catch-ups with.
Yes, with a regular group, acquaintance group or a hobby group or some sort of reunion of sorts.
Regular meetings that have to be held with clients or something, yeah. So for me, I don't like them when I switch off, and I just end up being a grey rock, which is, I anticipate, again, this is not necessarily good strategy, but I anticipate that this isn't going to lead anywhere, it's not going to interest me, and so I get it over and done with, and I'm likely just to give yes or no answers. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Yes, it looks like it's a bit of a rainy day today. Great, let's get on with what we're meant to be talking about. At least the meeting might be interesting, fingers crossed. But yeah, there are some times we just need to suffer. But we can, as I mentioned before, we can make it interesting too. We can try and in a very short space of time, try and see if we can pluck out some interesting moments or something of
that we're both interested in, both parties interested in. And then that just gives us a slightly different line of conversation, perhaps the next time we chat.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, if we're forced into these situations on a regular basis, we do probably rely on the masking. And that's, masking's generally a very bad thing with ADHD. It's something we don't want to do, but sometimes it can be a friend. Sometimes you put the mask on. As long as you know you're putting the mask on, as long as you're aware of it, and as long as you remove it afterwards and find a way of getting back to yourself. Sometimes you just have to do that. You can't change other people, and you can't expect them to be interesting or interesting enough for us. So it's awareness that it's okay. With ADHD, we probably have a very low tolerance for boring conversations and boring people delivering them.
Yes. So on that, there is an unofficial kind of strategy called the grey rock strategy, and I write about it in the book. And basically it is intentionally wearing a mask, and it was or could be used in a situation with a narcissist or someone who wants you to overtalk and overshare and prod you and poke you for an emotion. And in a situation when you go, well, actually I'm not ready for this, or this isn't an appropriate situation or environment, we can be a grey rock. And that is basically not feeding them with anything worthy of digesting. So it's yes or no answers, and it's not being mean about it. It's smiling, and because you don't become interesting, they move on to someone else, or they kind of give up on you. Now that is a form of masking, but that is used as a tool, and as Jill said, it's temporary. You put it on, you take it out, you put it on, and you take it straight off as soon as you're able to. So rather than feeling that it's your default, it's actually an intentional practice. So that's called the grey rock theory. And again, it's not scientifically proven, but anecdotally, it can work in those situations that you need to push through.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I use the grey rock as best I can. Small talk, back to small talk. The other thing that occurs to me with small talk is, another way of putting it is shallow conversation, where things just don't go beyond base one. They don't go into any interesting spaces where you're going to learn something. For me, if I'm interested, I just need to go deeper into something all the time. I need to learn that, and I've said that. Small talk can almost be entertainment in the way it comes back from, well, not entertainment, so the news, for instance. We don't watch TV news because, for me, it equates to small talk, because there's snippets of information and updates, but there's no depth behind them. There's no whys, wheres, wherefores, and that sort of thing, which is why I can't stand television news. As particularly in New Zealand, I'm sorry to say, it's really poor. But I do love to read news, and so what sounds a bit snobby, but what we used to call the broadsheets, where you'll find a piece of news and then there's proper investigative journalism behind it that goes behind the scenes. That's what's gone from small talk to big talk. Even though it's a one-way communication with me, that's what I need. And I keep that in mind when having conversations with people. That's what I'm trying to describe here. And it's okay to understand that, I think.
And you're talking about sort of deep diving into information. And the same could be said versus headline news versus a documentary, where they do have an opportunity to deep dive and thoroughly investigate something. That's also of interest. And wouldn't be, but anyway, that's one way, because we're looking at a screen.
Sometimes it's entertaining because you see it in the news. Oh, there's been a terrible snowstorm, or everyone's locked in by the snow. And we spoke to the locals. This is Dan. Oh, yeah, it's been really cold. There's lots of snow. Cut. It's like, oh, yeah. That's small talk. That's small entertainment. It doesn't work. But it can get. One of my survival mechanisms of this small talk thing is turning something into a joke. In fact, when I engage with someone and it's a passing moment with a stranger or something, I try humour. And humour with respect but presence, energy, humour. If I get that humour back, it doesn't matter how small the talk may be for a wee while, we've engaged on some level. So now I'm getting entertained. And if I'm getting entertained, perhaps I'm getting the dopamine.
Yes, and in fact, even if there's a null or a dull response, you're probably lifting your dopamine levels anyway because you're entertaining yourself.
Oh, well, that makes, that's not the mean way of doing it when I think, but that doesn't last too long because I don't like to laugh at other people. I like to laugh with them, but they can sometimes.
No, not laughing at them.
No.
Just when we laugh and we smile, it's good for us. So it's rewarding, self-reward.
So in the spirit of small talk, this is perhaps one of our shorter episodes because we don't want to linger on small talk for too long. We'd rather get stuck into the deeper stuff. But yes, you probably, like us, don't enjoy it. There are ways of surviving it. The number one rule, I think, is to avoid it if you can. But if you can't, there are ways of surviving it.
Yeah. And it's all about interest and reward and pleasure with this lift in dopamine. And if you can keep that in the back of your mind, maybe you can help with the small talk. Just lift it out of that sad little boring space.
Shallow puddle.
Thanks for listening.